how have you improved your leadership impact on your business?
My first was at Local Government Professionals, and I probably didn't start there as well as I would have liked to looking back. The second time I got that opportunity at AMEC, I was a lot more thoughtful about how I came in, how I arrived in the business, how I thought about the way it was going to, how my impact would happen on the business early on.
Do we have an image problem?
We absolutely have a perception issue. We've got people who think the mining industry is bad for the environment. That's just not accurate at all. We've actually got to start challenging some of those ideas that have sort of cemented as conventional wisdom and start to unpick them. And the mining industry's certainly got a lot. They've got a lot to offer.
What are you most optimistic about?
I think that a lot of the issues we face, we are better prepared to face than people realise.
Ivy and Gecko acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Australia, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and future.
Our guest today is Warren Pearce, CEO of the Association of Mining and Exploration Companies. He's focused on reducing the cost of doing business, cutting red tape and driving exploration, discovery and mining opportunities in Australia.
Warren Pearce, welcome to Hearts and Minds.
Thanks, David. Pleasure to be here.
It's refreshing to have someone who's not an executive of a mining or an exploration company, but you obviously represent them.
I do. I work with many of them.
You've over 500 odd members?
Yeah, almost 600 across the nation.
Wow.
So we grew out of Western Australia 40 odd years ago as a West Australian focused organisation, but the need was always there across the country. And so we've grown to that over the last sort of 7 or 8 years and now represent members pretty much everywhere you expect the miners to be.
We are the most important state. So after us, I suppose Queensland comes.
Queensland and New South Wales, big mining industries. Queensland big in minerals as well as coal. New South Wales primarily coal, but lots of opportunities. And there's still lots of prospectivity in Northern Territory and South Australia. So there's lots of opportunities nationwide, but it tends to be that Western Australia is still the focus. The geology is incredible. You've got a strong economic framework here that encourages investment. Starting to get a bit harder, but still the place to be.
Well, we'll talk about the Fraser Institute survey a bit later. But look, you've got an important, high-profile job. And you're flitting, travelling all over the place on a regular basis, engaging with a disparate mix of stakeholders, from the miners and the explorers to, government agencies and politicians. It must keep you very busy and charged.
Look, it does. It's been a really exciting opportunity. I've absolutely loved it. And the mining industry has the great fortune of being so significant in Australia, perhaps more in some states than others, but so significant it touches everything. So whether it's a policy change around health or something to do with the mining industry, tends to be you touch lots of points of government, lots of issues. And so day to day you're working on something different all the time. Meeting a whole range of people from ministers, prime ministers, premiers and chief ministers, all the way down to people, local governments and mayors and presidents and people in local community groups who are interested in what's going on in their community, want to support it, want to oppose it, have got concerns. Lots of things to be involved in.
It sounds like the life of a politician.
In some ways, it is a little like that. The difference is I don't have to get elected. So that does make things somewhat easier.
You do have a degree in law, and I'm wondering to what extent that assists you in what you do in lobbying.
Look, it's been helpful in terms of understanding legislative frameworks. I found it useful. I never wanted to be a lawyer, I might say, other than about the first 3 months of law school. I knew pretty early I didn't want to do it.
But you did complete the degree?
I finished the degree. I graduated, mostly because I needed to finish something. And then went to work for the WA government in the sort of a political role and sort of started my experience there. And after I left that role, I went to work for industry associations in and around the political spectrum. So lots of public policy issues in local government. Then the mining industry, I got to start at the Chamber of Minerals and Energy in the Northwest Manager role, which was during the last boom here, which was just extraordinary. Really exciting stuff, big gas projects, big mine projects, really massive nation-building stuff happening, and got a taste for it. And then really I was looking for a chance to sort of step out and run my own association and try and do things myself. And I got a chance back in local government with the local government officers, local government professionals during the amalgamation process. So basically I find myself not sure entirely out of my own making, headed for problem issues and big challenges, but that's probably what I spent my career doing. And the exploration sector and the junior end of the mining industry is just A1 for that.
Well, we're keen to get your take on leadership and how you engage with people. But before we do, Warren, let's go back. Tell us something about your early years. Where did you grow up? What was it like at the time?
So I grew up in Armidale. So I was born in 1980. So 80s and 90s is my sort of childhood years. Armidale Primary School. pretty ordinary family in some ways. Mum stopped work so I could to raise me, and I came up in a great community. The school was supported by the teachers, by the parents. Mostly what you did were the things that the school offered and the teachers volunteered with. So I played lots of sports, indoor hockey, basketball, orienteering, cross country, chess, all manner of things that people wanted to commit time to and expose their kids to and just give them a bit of variety. It was a great place to grow up.
Did you enjoy schoolwork?
I didn't mind it. Primary school was pretty straightforward. I was probably a little less interested in high school and then to some degree university. The truth is I'm just never really been a particularly self-motivated person in that sort of stuff. You're just working for yourself. I was interested in it. I always enjoyed reading, always enjoyed learning. But, once it got to the sort of exam phase, I was sort of not really that interested. So sort of found my way sort of through, I guess, ability and a reasonable amount of work, but nothing ridiculous. And I didn't really find my legs, so to speak, until I started full-time work, where I really sort of figured it out.
Was there a point in time during those early years, Warren, where there was a tipping point in terms of how you thought about yourself and how you might contribute and add value?
Yeah, that was my first job. So I would think my father got his experience where his place in the world and how he thought about it was shaped at university. It was like he was the first person in his family to do it, changed the way he thought about the world, and the way wasn't like that for me. It was a classroom in a place I didn't particularly want to be. Felt like you were sort of having to wait for your life to start. And I really found it in work where I found actually I was pretty good at this. I could work hard. I liked what I was doing and I was motivated by working for others. And so when you're doing something that had a benefit for others or people relying on you or needed you to actually do something, that's what drove me. And I found I enjoyed it. And so really from that point of view, that's where I sort of figured out that's really what I'm looking for, is something that gives you some purpose around what you're doing, not just for yourself, but for something bigger than that.
Yeah. It sounds to me as though you're pretty community-minded.
And member associations are just like that. I mean, they essentially are smaller communities of particular interest groups. Yeah. And so I found sort of a lot of value in that. I find that rewarding, but also it's enjoyable because you actually work with people who are coming together with a common purpose and to try and actually achieve something that they hope will be beneficial, not just for themselves, but for the broader state or for the nation. Yeah. And that's an exciting place to be.
Tell us something that not many people know about you.
Look, I was the under-10 West Australian chess champion for Western Australia. I was briefly a chess prodigy, so to speak, perhaps mistakenly so. I got sent off to the Junior Australian Chess Championships. We all sort of tracked along, sort of chess club at my primary school, and we'd all come to participate in this sort of 10-day thing, and they have rankings. And so we all go to have a look. We're 10 and 11, right? So, we're all down the bottom. I can't find my name. My name's not on there. My friends are there. My name's at the top. I'm number 3.
So how did you get the gift of being a really good chess player? Well,
didn't really. So let's just let me finish the story. So I was ranked at 2,050, which is sort of third on the list. There was a typo. It should have been 1050. I would have been the bottom ranking. And consequently, on my first day, I had to play the guy who was number 2, who was 2,300 or something and on his way to being a grandmaster. And they sort of set you up on a bit of a show more for the best game of the round. Yeah. I got flattened in about 10 minutes and the rest of the kids were kept going for another hour or so. So that was my end of my chess prodigy. But for a brief period, I was a gun 10-year-old.
There you go. Do you still play?
No. No one to play with. And the computer chess games have got a bit hard.
Well, you've got a 2-year-old that you can raise to be another Kasparov, perhaps.
I should be able to beat her till she's about 10.
Now, talking of doing things in your leisure time, like playing chess, when you're not concentrating on your work, how do you recharge the batteries?
At the moment, it's raising a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
So my partner Ari and our little girl Aurora takes up a lot of our time, obviously, and wanting to embrace that family piece and really just help her grow and develop and enjoy life as part of our community, which has been important to us. Yeah. So it's good. Wouldn't always say it's relaxing. I'm sure every parent's found that. The one thing I actually have found recently, which is going back to something I did in high school, is playing basketball, which is now I've got a hoop in the backyard and I'll often just go out for 10, 15 minutes and just shoot some jump shots and think about the things going on at work or on the day, and it's just a nice way of working through some things and a bit of activity, and I find I sort of walk away from that feeling a little bit weight off the shoulders. Do
you listen to music or play podcasts when you...
I do, mostly on the travel, to and from work, podcasts, a lot of things around sort of history and those types of things, current affairs as well, and just try and find a way of just stepping away from the workplace and bridging between your house and work.
Yeah, because it must be a full-on job, I'd imagine, representing so many companies within the industry. And I'd imagine you get calls on your mobile phone at odd hours of the evening. And
yeah, it's a lot. It's changed a lot in the sense the organisation's grown. When I started, we were at sort of 2017, we were 6 people. I was number 7, I think, when I started, and that meant I was doing everything. I was flying all over the place. We had one person based east, and I was basically on a plane every week. They told me the job would be, see me out of Perth 1 week a month. What I heard was I'd be away 1 week and home 3 weeks. Turned out it didn't work like that. You're on a plane 2 days, 3 days every week. And so it was a lot. As the organisation's grown, you've been able to build the various places, so you have to be travelling less, but it still means you're on the plane, half the year. And that can be enjoyable and it's certainly exciting, but it does mean it makes it a bit hard back home. So you've got to find ways of managing it.
Apart from being a leader of an advocacy association, as you are, you've got a huge exposure to a lot of leaders in the mining sector. So what stands out to you, Warren, as the non-negotiable personal qualities of good leadership when you look around you and see all these people leading businesses?
Gee, that's an interesting question, isn't it? So the first thing my mind runs to is perseverance. Like the reality and I was thinking more about success rather than necessarily just leadership. I think leadership's more than just, creating a successful business and making a lot of money. But one thing I do notice in those people, the ones who really drive forward, the ones who often impress you, are the ones, and they've kept at it and kept at it and kept at it, and they're prepared to back themselves. In this industry particularly, risk-taking, like these guys are all, and women, men and women are all very prepared to take risks with their own money. They're invested themselves. They throw in behind what they're doing, and they're prepared to take the risks and wear the downside. A lot of industries aren't like that. They're very different. I come from, my previous role was in local government. Not a lot of risk in that space. A lot of leadership, a lot of great leaders, but just a very different environment. So when I look at those things, I look at those pieces. Those people are prepared to actually lead, as in, step out into a place where people aren't there yet. They're going to try and bring people with them. In case of my members, they're bringing investors. They're bringing shareholders. They've got to bring people along with that journey and convince them they're an investment worth making. And really, what are they investing in? Are they investing in the rocks in the ground? To a degree. They're also investing in the people. They're trusting to turn that into something real and make them money. And that's a pretty heavy weight to carry. So what I see in those people mostly comes down to perseverance, a willingness to drive themselves forward, take risks, but also an ability to bring people with them. If you can't do that, there are hours you can be on an absolute winner, but if you can't find anyone who's prepared to come with you on that journey, invest some money and support it, not going anywhere.
In many ways, they're selling a hope and a dream, aren't they? At the junior end of the community, and I suppose it's important to remember that you're mainly representing the very small junior end of the exploration industry and the production operations, the miners in the mid-tier, as opposed to the BHPs and the Rios.
Absolutely. We've got big members too, like Fortescue and Hancock Iron Ore. But the point and the purpose of the organisation is to represent the small players, because the big players are always going to have opportunities to talk to government. They're not lots of access, lots of opportunity to be heard, very good at getting their voice and their message into the right places. The small players have got to pull together, join together, and have a united voice coming to government. And if we can do that, we can really outsize our voice and outsize our influence.
And it's more likely the leaders in the small businesses will tend to be more entrepreneurial, more risk-taking.
Have to be.
They in large part, I think they're more charismatic as personalities and individuals compared to the very big companies.
And they need to be, because they have to stand out. I mean, if you go to the investment conferences and watch, 50 presentations a day from company to company, it's pretty easy to get them all mixed together.
Yeah.
So the way of standing out, personnel is important, being able to demonstrate some charisma, looking like you're someone who's got a bit of get up and go. The ones that sort of stand out, often the ones who catch a lot of attention, also manage to pull a lot of the investment. So it's important.
It's so true. You go to these conference days and sometimes you just have to wake yourself up. They tend to be a bit repetitive, a bit boring. But you're right. When you get a leader who's well practiced in delivering the pitch, and gets people excited, it makes such a difference.
Clearly, you're not a geologist, and that's the thing. Like, you go to these places, like, I got a law background, so I had a background in working through some relatively uninteresting stuff. Geology is hard work, and either if you don't understand it, then how you're making decisions about what you're investing in. You're making decisions based on the people. You're making decisions based on what they've told you and what you can understand, and comparisons across the market. So finding ways to stand out, looking different, looking like you've got an opportunity that others don't. That's really one of the ways that these people catch the attention and really distinguish themselves or separate themselves from the others.
Let me ask you to be a little bit introspective for a few moments and look at your own leadership and your own style. What have you learned about yourself, and how have you improved your leadership impact on your business?
Look, I think I've got a lot better over time. My first experience with it, so I'm on my second real leadership role as a CEO. My first was at Local Government Professionals, which is an organisation representing officers. I got brought in to deal with amalgamations, and I probably didn't start there as well as I would have liked to, looking back. I arrived there really driven, bull in the china shop, wanting to get things done, sort of a young man in a hurry. The second time I got that opportunity at AMEC, I was a lot more thoughtful about how I came in, how I arrived in the business, how I thought about the way it was going to, how my impact would happen on the business early on and sort of over time. And I've really sort of developed that through the experience in the last sort of 7 or 8 years. I've got a lot, I wouldn't say more relaxed, I've got a quite relaxed and informal style of it, in the sense that I think you learn to bring people to the journey. You put them around the purpose. Why are we here? What are we doing? And then you put them in front of the members. The members, the work, the industry drives the pressure, drives the work. So you don't need to do that. What your job is to do is keep them on focus, make sure they're driving in the right directions, and then measure outcomes. And we focus on outcomes rather than performance indicators or those sort of pieces. In the end, advocacy is not one of those things. It's not like building a mine where you've got a certain output. The reality is you can do all the work in the world and put the best advocacy campaign together, but if the government's not convinced, or you've got the wrong people you're dealing with, you're not going anywhere. So you can be a lot of work for no outcome. You can also have a little amount of work for a lot of outcome. How do you measure that? So you can put forward the effort, you can measure that. What you really want to do is make sure the right people are putting forward the right ideas in the right way, and then good things will come from that, and you keep building on that.
Do you find that your team members tend to come from other advocacy service providing organisations? What sort of mix of backgrounds have you got?
Sometimes. We've got a lot of people from the industry who've come out of varying roles. We've got a few geologists who sort of turned their trades into different types of things and wanted to work on more industry issue related issues. I've had people come out of government and some political officers. I've found that's actually quite useful in the sense that what we're dealing with largely is government processes and government decision making and how that sort of works with the departments and ministers. So people have had that experience sort of understanding that process works. They're usually pretty good on policy. We're all generalists in that sense. And then we rely on our members for the expertise. And then our job really in some ways is to translate that experience into something that government can understand and take forward as some kind of positive policy. So there's lots of pieces to it, but I think my genuine learning about it is not rocket science, but it does lend itself to a certain sort of people who are, to some degree, a bit self-starting, requires a lot of initiative, a lot of driving yourself forward on behalf of others. You've got to keep looking for opportunities because we're in control of nothing. We have to convince someone or persuade someone else to do something. It's not within our control. So unless we're continually looking for opportunities, continuing driving that forward, then the chances of actually getting an outcome for our members is pretty scant. So you're looking for people who are somewhat driven and driven towards achieving the same purpose.
A lot's made of the ongoing talent shortage in the mining industry and the exploration industry. I'm a recruiter of these people, mainly at the senior management executive end. But it occurs to me, Warren, and I'd be interested in your point of view on this, that in order to deliver our pipeline of projects and operate the mines of the future, we need a continuing stream of people entering the industry, and we're not seeing enough of them, either at the highly educated level, the professional level, and at the blue-collar level. Is it because people are, to some extent, disengaged with the mining industry, or they've lost faith in the industry to some extent? Do we have an image problem?
We absolutely have a perception issue. There's no doubt about that. I think that's been a long time coming. Our advocate groups that have been sort of adverse to the industry have been campaigning against our industry for a long time, and a lot of those things they've been campaigning for have started to set in conventional wisdom. You've got people who think the mining industry is bad for the environment. Well, that's just not accurate at all. In fact, what it is actually more important than ever. The reality is you can't get past it. The reality is things have to come from somewhere. The raw materials is our starting point. That's a good place to be. They can't get rid of us. Yeah. But when you start to explain to people, actually, we've got a really important role in the energy transition, that all these critical minerals are going to be required for renewable technologies, all these things that are hopefully going to decarbonise our economy, people start to get a bit more excited about it. But what I have found is there's just so much going on these days. The reality is we're competing against absolutely everything with all sorts of future industries and future prospects that most people don't even understand, may not actually occur. It's very hard to get people's attention to think about an established industry. And if you're not from mining or you don't know people who are in mining, then you don't think about it much. Like, I'm not from a mining family. My father was a teacher, my mother was worked for the CSIRO. Like, the first time I came across a mining company, I was playing basketball against an Aboriginal team that had been brought down to Kimberley by Rio Tinto. And I remember asking my coach, who the hell is Rio Tinto? And he said, I'm a mining company. So, okay. That was good. So I did something decent about that. We had a good basketball game, and I didn't think about it again until really after I'd left university. And sort of in Western Australia, you start to get exposed to all this sort of stuff, and the reality of the mining industry is very big here. So you start to see these things and how it interacts with the other parts of the economy and how important it is. And eventually an opportunity comes your way, and you find yourself in this incredible industry that's actually a global industry. It can take you anywhere. But if you're in school, and they don't teach it, and they don't talk about it, or indeed they talk about it in a way that's not particularly complimentary, then you're probably looking somewhere else when you're thinking about your future career. So we've got to do something to address that.
I think mining companies are increasingly understanding this and placing and investing more of their time and effort and money into the education process, getting kids when they're in primary and secondary school. I know Tanya Constable, who was on the show a few months ago, talked a lot about the MCA, the Minerals Council of Australia, working really hard at this because they are aware that we really do need to address the problem before it gets any worse. And I look at the environmental conscious people out there, and there's a lot of them. A good poster child is Bellevue Gold, first gold mining company in the world to achieve net zero emissions. And we need to make more fuss about these good stories in the industry.
Well, that's right. And I think that's the bit that sort of, I think, right now people don't see. But also I think you've actually got to deal with some of the issues that people have that are genuine concerns about our industry. Like, I think a lot of the campaigning stuff always focuses on the positive. Yeah. So what's good about the mining industry? We like it's good for jobs. We know it's good for the economy. They're good. So we talk about that a lot. And I think we don't actually spend a lot of time dealing with the sort of negatives that people say, well, doesn't it impact the environment? Say, well, yeah, it does. But the impact's not what we think it is. And in fact, our overall impact to the environment could actually be very beneficial when it comes to things like emissions and decarbonisation. So we've actually got to start challenging some of those ideas that have sort of cemented as conventional wisdom and start to unpick them. I think if we do that, I think people are open-minded to it. Like, people are looking for opportunities, and the mining industry's certainly got a lot. They've got a lot to offer.
And now we take a short break to acknowledge our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Halo Civil Engineering. Halo is a multidisciplined civil contractor that specialises in the delivery of complex civil projects across defence, infrastructure, energy and resources. A West Australian company committed to delivering dynamic solutions with a focus on zero harm, while having a positive impact on their industry, clients and the people they serve. For more information, search for Halo Civil Engineering on socials or visit halocivil.com.
Is your business ready to amplify its voice? At Podwave Studios, we offer professional video podcast production services that help you connect with clients, build your brand, and grow your audience. From corporate messaging to thought leadership, we've got you covered. Book your session at podwavestudios.au today.
As the only executive search and leadership consulting firm to be admitted membership of the Minerals Council of Australia, Ivy & Gecko is uniquely resourced to advocate for the interests of our exploration, project development and mining clients.
Engagement is key. We all know that if people are engaged in the job, if they're highly motivated and love coming to work every day, then they begin to apply discretionary effort. And when that happens, great things happen. There are all the metrics move in the right direction: productivity, quality, safety,
Yep.
profitability. Ultimately, how do we get people more engaged? Have you got any insights in that area?
In terms of mining, in terms of my business, the way I think about it is basically inclusivity. You try and involve people into as much of the business or much of the organisation and what you do as possible, and you give them a chance to be influential in what happens. And then once they're engaged, and the truth is they've got you've hired them for a reason. You presumably think they've got the ability to actually help your business and help your members. Once you've got them up and running, your job is to give as much autonomy over them as possible. Encourage initiative. Don't overly penalise mistakes. Your hands are in their back, pushing them forward. And if they're out there doing that on our behalf and our members' behalf, then I know good things are going to happen. If you constantly create a structure around people where everything has to go through a formal decision-making process, rather than some informal arrangements around how that happens, you build up administration bureaucracy, people just sink under it and they check out. So we're a small organisation, 20 people trying to deal with 6, 7 state territory governments plus the Commonwealth government. We haven't got time for that. We want to run as lean as possible. We keep admin as low as possible, and I try and encourage people to be out and doing that. And because I've got a team that's remote from the head office in Perth, we've got people working from home, we've got people working in offices in Sydney and Brisbane and Victoria, South Australia. The reality is you can't manage it like that anyway. You've got to actually trust them to do things and then give them the support that they need to actually go and do it. And if you're doing that, most you'll see good results. I've been immensely encouraged by watching people grow in that space, and the more you give them the opportunity, the more they dig into it.
You mentioned a safe workplace environment. I think a lot of leadership is about creating the conditions where you can have a safe place for dangerous ideas. In other words, people should be encouraged to be critical, respectfully, and to challenge other people's points of view and ideas without feeling as though their recriminations will follow. So I think that is one of the key qualities of leadership is encouraging people to speak their mind honestly, as long as it's respectfully.
Yeah, and I think we preach this to government, right? So one of the biggest concerns about the way government makes decisions or the way they're advised is risk aversion. Yeah. Departmental officers, government officers are afraid to make decisions for fear of making a mistake and then getting essentially all the blame dumped on them. Yeah. Essentially, you've got to give people the freedom to make mistakes, and then they do that. Well, our approach to it is, look, we've made a mistake, own up to it, great, let's fix the problem,
learn from
and
it.
Then we don't have to worry about it again. Don't make the same mistake again. Yeah. But if you continue to put people in decision-making roles and they make one mistake and then you crucify them for it, well, they're not going to be making any more decisions again that don't have a huge amount of caution in them, and that caution prevents new ideas, it prevents innovation, it prevents bold thinking, so we try to have an environment where. Admittedly, it's a somewhat confidential environment. It's inside the association, but with our members, we want our people to talk freely, to tell us the real problems they've got and their ideas about how you fix them, and then we work together to try and turn that into something that actually can be presented to government or presented publicly that can be effective. Just if you start by policing the thinking at the start, you're just cutting off a lot of opportunity.
That's right. We'll talk about some of the frustrations that you hear on a common basis from your member companies soon, but you've been the leader of AMEC for about 8 years, I think now. Talk to us a little bit about the values that you've embedded into the organisation, and what type of culture have you deliberately tried to create within AMEC?
Look, we've tried to create kind of a somewhat relaxed culture. Like I said, I think we work in a very fast-paced organisation. There are things happening all the time. We're reacting to them. What we try and talk about is how you actually take an idea from basic concept into something that actually a government could take forward and implement, and how you get a good idea up. And one of the things that we try and preach here is that good ideas will find a way of getting up. They can be sped up by the political process or slowed down, but eventually, if you've got something that's new or something that has positive benefits, the reality you've got a good chance of getting an idea up. If you're just out there doing the same old thing, and a lot of this stuff with industry advocacy is infuriating. It's just you hear people, the same idea you've heard for 30 years, and it didn't get up 30 years ago and didn't get up 20 years ago, and there was a bunch of reasons why it's not going to get up now, and that's what they're putting on the table. And you're like, well, you're just wasting everyone's time. You've really got to find ways of changing what you're bringing forward, finding other ways to accomplish things, finding things that actually are achievable. And if you're not doing that, then really not bringing much conversation. Now, we've found if you're the people bringing forward the new ideas, even if you might be a small organisation compared to others, or you mightn't have the same weight behind you, you've got a much better chance of being influential. So we sort of talk about thinking that. In terms of the organisation, we very much teach a team ethos. We're not big enough to have, we've got clear delineation between roles, but the reality is every day someone's got to help out someone else. So we're looking for people who actually value that. They want to be part of that and work together. And we think about values and how they line up with industry and what the association's values are. So I'm really clear that when someone's come to the organisation, I want to ask them, your personal values line up with the organisation's values. Doesn't have to be 100%, but you've got to be pretty. I always find that if you're not in an organisation where your personal values line up with what you're going to be doing at your work and what the value of the organisation or the business you work for, then you're going to run into a point where you're pretty unhappy there, or you're not able to do the job in the way it needs to be done. And as representatives, one of the things I'm relatively comfortable with is the fact that I'm not always putting my view. I'm putting my members' view. That's my job. So I think about those things when I bring people in the organisation. And you've got to remember, we represent members all the way from mineral exploration in coal, mining and exploring for uranium. There are things that people might have strong views about. They might have strong views about climate change or around the treatment of Indigenous peoples and how they think the mining industry might act. So you've got to be careful that they actually understand our industry and understand their values aren't too far away. If they're not, then you don't want them working in your organisation. Best thing you can find for a person, I think, is to find a good fit between what they want to be doing, what the organisation's doing. If you get that together, it's going to work. Most people who don't work out in those roles tend to be because they're in the wrong place. Actually should be somewhere else.
Yeah, well said. What are among the most common frustrations then that you hear from your member companies?
Increasing cost, increasing barriers. So it's all a spectrum, but in the end it comes down to land access. And I think that's one of the least talked about problems in this country is probably one of the biggest ones. And it's a sleeper issue in a lot of ways. So getting onto ground for a mineral explorer is this frustrating and lengthy process. You've got to apply for your exploration licence, you've got to go and get a land access agreement, you'll have to go and do some cultural heritage surveys, you'll have to talk to the traditional owner group, all of which is sort of fine, except it can take you 2 years before you actually get on ground to actually begin doing anything that actually looks like what your investor has put some money into the company to do, which is a pretty hard conversation. These days, the cost of doing that means that most of the money, a lot of the money that's invested, actually goes back to government in the first place in tenant rental fees or local government rates, in your engagements with additional owner groups and doing cultural heritage surveys, before money actually goes into the ground, into an activity like drilling or exploration techniques that actually might return on the investment from an investor. When that starts to get out of whack, or those costs become too high, they become a real barrier. And you've got to remember, explorers, it's not their own money most of the time. They've got to go and find someone who's prepared to volunteer their investment to put into mineral exploration, and they're doing so because they want to make some money. They're hoping that investment might turn to something. And mineral exploration is high risk. It's also high reward if you're successful, but it does mean we have to rely very much on this process working out. And the length of time it takes to get on ground, the increasing cost as a consequence, is becoming a real barrier for us doing exploration. And if there's a barrier of exploration, it becomes a problem for discovery. And discovery is what happens when we find something that might be turned into a operating mine. And that's where the real value gets created for the state and the nation and the communities. There are lots of benefits that can flow from those operations. If you constrict the exploration activity at one end, you absolutely constrict what comes out the other, and that's where the real loss is going to be.
One of the most talked about approval processes last year, and it was talked about for all the wrong reasons, was McPhillamy's, the Section 10 ruling. It seemed to me as a non-mining individual, but someone who's interested in observing what's going on in the industry, that for that company Regis to invest for so long and to spend so much money on getting to the point they were at, and at the 11th hour, after 10 or 12 years worth of lobbying to get this project up, it was smacked down. surely we've got to avoid, and the reflection that had on the overseas investment community, they were looking at Australia saying, this is a high-risk jurisdiction. We'll send our money somewhere else.
And that brings us straight back to the Fraser Institute. So I think Section 10, it's always been there, but the reality is if your company goes through the process and does the right thing, you expect you're going to get through. That's the fundamental operating strength of Australia has been. If you go and do the process the right way and you go through the process, you find something, you're going to get a chance to develop it. And you will get the approval to mine. It'll have a lot of conditions. There'll be strong environmental conditions. There'll be strong conditions around how you engage traditional owners. But if you do the right thing, you're going to get a chance to mine and realise your investment. Yeah. Section 10 of McPhillamys was a shock, and it came to the international investment community as big sovereign risk issue for Australia, because suddenly a company that has done all the right things, and in this case had talked to the right group, the people who spoke for country, and then out of the woodwork comes another group that the people that spoke for country, the recognised group, said should not be trusted. It's not their responsibility to speak for country, for the federal government to say, no, I think we're going to take the word of these people and we're going to turn this project over and not allow it to proceed in its current form. For that reason, was an immense shock to industry, because it went fundamentally against what everyone understood about our process and the way in which it worked. You do the right things, you'll get the opportunity.
The obvious question is, to what extent did the government do their due diligence on this minor group that was objecting to it?
Well, you'd have to ask. And the problem is you don't really get the answers. There is a process, it's a lengthy process, but in essence what happened in that process was the reporter, the person who's asked to investigate, came back, gave a recommendation to the department did some more work, made a different recommendation, the minister chose to follow it. Bad decision, just a bad decision.
So that was a contributing factor, I suspecting, as going from number one globally as the jurisdiction of choice for investment to what, 17th?
Well, WA 17th.
Yeah.
The rest of states and territories fell even further. So, it was one component to it, and a big one, but it wasn't alone. In the last 3 or 4 years, the things the industry's been talking about is new barriers, along with new policies and legislation being proposed. So Section 10 is one element. The environmental reforms that were being proposed last year that have since been scrapped. The Aboriginal cultural heritage issues here in Western Australia, the legislation. It's a range of these issues, all of which has upset the normal or established practice that has gone for a long time, that people have relied on and investors have relied on, that sort of said, well, Australia's not looking so good anymore. So look, that's not good news, but it does mean the issues that are affecting our investment attraction actually are still within our control, so we can fix them. And you're starting to see fixes being worked on now. The WA government's looking at the ACH framework, the Cultural Heritage Framework here, and what they can do to actually provide that investment certainty, make sure we're protecting heritage in the right way. The federal government's changed their approach on environmental legislation. You've seen the Productivity Commission. Not exactly sure what's coming out of that, but one of the clear recommendations is our processes must get faster, reduce the cost and time involved for proponents who are investing in Australia. So there's certainly things we can do to get ourselves back in the game. But we've got to remember we're in global competition. Like Australia, it's not just one state against another. You don't have to invest in mining. If you choose to, you don't have to invest in Australia. We've got to compete for that investment. Well, countries around the world are working hard to take it.
They certainly are, and a big cost of doing business in this country, of course, is the cost of energy and the cost of labour. Now, you look at our competitors, including Indonesia, who've hammered our local nickel industry and are on the verge of doing the same with the alumina industry by the sound of it. I mean, how do we compete with these companies, with jurisdictions?
There's a couple of things to say about it. I think the first thing is we've got a lot of things that mean we're a higher cost jurisdiction that are things we don't want to go away from. We pay fair wages. We have high environmental conditions, strong environmental protections. These things are important. We shouldn't be looking to sort of drive those things down. Things like energy costs, you've got to wonder how we got to a situation where our energy prices are going north when we have so much abundant energy resources in this country. So we've got some failings of our political and our regulatory system that have led to that. We need to actually reverse those. But we also got to get serious about understanding what happens when we turn investment away. If someone's looking to invest in the Australian mining industry and we turn that investment away, whether that's coming from nations like China or other places, it's going to go to our competitors. And when it does, there can be some really bad impacts, particularly here in Australia. The nickel industry is a great example. That money went to Indonesia. Indonesia has essentially turned on half the world's nickel supply in the last 5 years and pretty much put our nickel industry out of business.
I mean, it's a relatively dirty product, but the world is not yet at a point where it's prepared to pay a premium for cleaner product.
That's right. and particular nations aren't particularly worried about it. And so the reality is that affects the overall price, and that can impact what's happening here at higher standards. So until such time as there is an ESG premium, so to speak, or a premium for ethically sourced minerals, I think we're a long way away from that, sadly. Until that time, it makes it very difficult. But we've got to make sure we've absolutely got as lean as possible everywhere we can to reduce costs. And that means particularly our regulatory systems, efficient and timely and as low cost as possible. Things that, frankly, don't make a difference. Whether an environmental assessment process takes 6 months or 12 months, ultimately what you see is the outcomes are almost the same anyway. Let's get decisions right, but let's make them quickly.
When Tanya was on the show, she talked about utilising AI to speed up the process of approvals. She was in the very early stages of trialling that with the MCA. On the topic of AI, to what extent can that be beneficial to this problem we've got?
Look, we'll see. But I think before you get to the AI piece, you've got to sort out how you want to do your regulation. So, for example, like one of the things that we've worked on for now probably 15 years before my time, which is finally in as legislation and part of the process, is called eligible mining activities. It started up as an effort to try and get essentially risk-based outcomes, so a risk-focused, risk-based regulation, which basically means you put your effort and your energy on those things that have significant environmental risks, and those things that have low impacts or low environmental risk, you put less energy to. What happens right now across the country is all those things are exploration programs. Thousands of approvals every year have to go through a person who's looking at a low impact activity that ultimately going to tick off that takes, depending on where you are in Western Australia, 15 days or 30 days, some are over East months, for what's pretty much small beer, when they should be concentrating on the things that have big environmental impacts around projects or particularly sensitive environments. So if you can set your legislation up in a way like we have now, which says, well, in those areas that are non-sensitive environmental areas that we've identified, you don't need to go through an assessment process for an exploration program. You can notify and you take the standard conditions and you operate with the standard conditions, you can simply move forward. That gets a huge amount of admin off government's plate, takes a huge amount of time off industry's plate, makes zero difference in terms of environmental outcomes, and you focus the department's energies and their resources on the areas that have potential significant impacts and how you mediate and manage those. If you set it up like that, then suddenly the processes, whether they're online or they're using AI, suddenly become a lot more useful, because then you've got a process that actually supports them. If you've got a situation now where someone's got to sit down and go through everything at absolute length, well, AI is going to struggle to develop to do that quickly. So digitising processes, getting more of those things in that space. The exploration space, the place I think AI is going to be most helpful actually will be in going through the data and identifying targets. So one of Australia's great advantages is we have massive amounts of pre-competitive geological data held by the state geosurveys, held by Geoscience Australia. A lot of it just is not in a format that AI can easily search. We've got to digitise that, get it into the right formats, and then suddenly all those algorithms, machine learning programs, and people from well outside our industry can suddenly start bringing their innovations and technologies in a way that could be really helpful. If that helps us speed up our discovery process, better target our minerals, we can realise those benefits much more quickly. And at much less expense. And that's an advantage the rest of the world can't have, because they don't have the same levels of pre-competitive geological data available to them.
Warren, we're running out of time, but I do want to ask some rapid-fire questions. If you could invite a much-admired leader, either living or deceased, to your home for dinner, who would it be, and what would be the most important question you'd ask them?
I thought about this after you asked me that question. I thought, well, Winston Churchill probably. My question actually would be, how did you keep persevering from between, failure and tragedy and disaster from one thing to the next to keep achieving things?
Yeah.
How did you keep moving forward? Because I think that's the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
Most of you see people fall over at those hurdles. That's what I'd like to know.
What's a non-fiction book that you found very valuable in terms of improving your leadership skills?
I actually really like Start With Why, Simon Sinek. It's one of the few I think actually really crystallise a good idea. It's about purpose. Yeah. And for our types of organisations, the people who want to work there and are driven by it, we're there for a purpose. It's much more important. Like almost all of my staff could make a better salary working for one of my members. But they stay with us and stick with it because the purpose drives them. And if you start with the reason for being, then everything else flows from that.
Yeah, he's a great communicator, Simon Sinek. I've seen him on a few videos. He's quite inspiring, and I like that book. And I also like another one, Leaders Eat Last. It's all about listening and giving people an opportunity to express their point of view before you jump in and try and influence the situation. But really good stuff for leadership development. What's the best business or career advice that you've been given?
Best advice that I took, not as much as I wish I had, was actually from Kevin Sheedy.
Really?
And so when I started my first CEO role at Low Gun Professionals, one of the first things that was happening was their big annual conference, and they had a sports dinner, and Kevin Sheedy was the guest speaker. And he spoke a lot about his experience, not as a player, but as a coach, and his early years coaching. And after he was finished speaking and signing autographs, I grabbed him from a minute and said, look, what's your advice for new players? Like, I'm just starting out. I'm in a job where I'm 31, 32, so I'm young. All my members are local government CEOs, got much more experience than me. I've been brought in for this sort of thing. What would you say to me? What's your advice? And what he said was really simple. He said, look, just listen. Just listen. And he went back to a time when he'd started coaching. He was 21, 22, and he was coaching these men. Some of these people had come back from war, had all sorts of life experience that was just much. So what am I going to teach them about life? Nothing. But I'm here to teach them how to play as a team. I can help them with that. They've hired you for a reason. Focus on that part, and the rest of it, listen, learn, and bring that in. And it wasn't really what I wanted to hear. I was, young man in a hurry. Wanted to do things, get on with things, but it was good advice, and I got to admit I learned a lot from those members and those people, and learnings that stayed with me today.
I've had about 25 guests on this program to date, Warren, and one other guest has said Kevin Sheedy as one of the leaders they most admire, and that was Tony Kiernan.
Oh, is that right? Okay. Yeah. See, but that's the thing, right? So I've been thinking about times like Kevin Sheedy was never one of my heroes. I was too young, like maybe my father's perhaps of that generation, and so I never saw him in that sort of way. I knew about the baby bombers and so on, but what I was really impressed by how thoughtful he was around it, and I got to admit I took his advice for a while. I wish I'd held on to it more. And it sounds like very simple, and it doesn't really sound that particularly intelligent. But when you think about it, actually, if you actually can practice it and do it, it'll change the way you think.
I think I put Kevin Sheedy in the same category as Wayne Bennett.
Oh, okay.
Both of them, seasoned campaigners who take a young man and look holistically at that life of that person, their background, their heritage, their personal issues. It's not just about developing the technical football skills of an individual. It's about understanding that person and their purpose in life and so on. They are very good developers of human beings, I think.
Well, you got to take people as more than just how they are from 9 to 5 in the workplace. Yep. Like they've all got things going in their lives and their families and other things, some good, some bad, and sometimes that's going to affect what happens in the workplace. But if you get to know them and understand them and work with them and support them, you'll find they give back so much more.
What are you most optimistic about, Warren?
I'm actually pretty optimistic about a lot of things. I'm more optimistic about about the future of our nation than probably most people seem to be these days. I think that a lot of the issues we face, we are better prepared to face than people realise. And I think, I look at my industry particularly, I actually think our future's really bright. And partly it's because I've been in an industry that's been driven towards future-facing opportunities with critical minerals. You think about most of my members are gold explorers. The opportunity that's come with that energy decarbonisation piece and revolution has really changed what we're involved in. And suddenly my members who are looking to be explorers, maybe miners, are thinking about being value adders and how they contribute into the supply chain and how they look for those opportunities. So it's changed the way we think about our industry. It's changed about the opportunities we think about. And I think we're perhaps better placed to do this because we've got such strong foundation industries to build from. And I'm, from what I see in terms of the young people coming into my business, into our industry, they might have different values in some ways, but I've found them very impressive. And I think, people sort of jokingly perhaps despair about that. I'm not despairing about it. I'm optimistic about it.
And what would you say is a big risk that we're not paying enough attention to?
In our industry and perhaps our nation, land use conflict. And so this isn't about barriers to getting on land so much. It's our biggest industries mining, agricultural, pastoral, all big land users. Our big future industries, renewable industry, solar, wind, hydrogen maybe, all big land users. Guess what? It's all the same space. And so we're competing with each other and now in conflict. We've got to work those issues out. If we can get to a collaborative space and a cooperative space, then this will work and it'll work really well for everybody. If we don't, what we're going to do is set our established industries against our new industries, and we're going to cull the opportunities of both.
What's your favourite productivity hack or daily habit that you think would be valuable to other people?
Oh, speed up your podcasts. So if you're listening 1.5 times, you can get me and you.
Depends
at,
how fast the
another
person
50%.
speaks. I mean, you're a fairly fast talker. I'm not sure I'd be listening to this at 1.5.
Maybe 1.25. But it does actually, it'll condense some of the stuff, particularly for things like you can get some longer stuff into short trips.
Yeah.
I think that's worth doing.
What do you think you should start doing?
I should start exercising more. I think that's always been part of my advice, but that's certainly something I feel like I've been letting go and last a while.
Yeah. And what should you stop doing?
Snacking.
They go hand in hand, don't they?
That's right, yeah.
What advice would you give your 25-year-old self to help you lead a better quality life?
Put less pressure on yourself. I think, and I remember this, you're always in a rush to try and do something, become something, whatever it was, whether that was career aspiration or something else. There's a lot of pressure that gets heaped on young people these days, perhaps even more than when I was young.
Do you think social media has
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt on that. I'm surprised just how much pressure it puts on us adults, just in our working lives. You're just constantly having to respond to things minute to minute in a way you just never had to think about before.
And the algorithms that are sent to you make it tend to put you in a place where it's an echo chamber. You're just fed information that reinforces your existing point of view, as opposed to presenting you with fresh alternatives to consider.
Yeah, that's right. And you've got to keep questioning things and keep being a critical thinker, critical learner, looking at those things critically. Not so critically you end up in that bubble down at conspiracy, but that you're actually not just taking what's being fed to you, because these days it's coming from a lot of unreputable sources. But I mostly think about that pressure component. I think, if you take some pressure off and actually enjoy the ride, you'll probably find it benefits you in the end.
Warren, thanks for being our guest on Hearts and Minds. You're making a great contribution, I think, in terms of advocating for our industry, the explorers and the miners. We need people like you in our corner, so good luck and thanks for being our guest.
Yeah, thanks, David, and thanks for telling our stories. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to Hearts and Minds. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a rating or share it with a friend. And don't forget to follow us and connect on social media for updates on all of our upcoming guests. I'm Alana Bray-White, and I look forward to you joining us for our next episode.